I had just driven more than 3 hours through a Colorado snowstorm to witness the most horrifying paradox of my life. My wife, Diane, was huddled outside the porch of a mansion worth 45 million U.S. dollars. Inside, my son and my daughter-in-law were laughing out loud, raising their glasses by a warm fireplace. They left their own mother out there, in the cold. If this story resonates with you, please hit the subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And now, let me take you back to that moment. The cold in Aspen that night, even wrapped in the thickest coat I owned, was nothing compared to what I felt the moment I stepped out of my SUV. My car, a heavy Range Rover, came to a stop right in front of the slate stone steps. The silence was terrifying. Only the wind howling through tall pine trees, and the soft thud of falling snow. This rustic modern mansion, one of my newest designs, was supposed to be a refuge. Dark timber frames, wide glass windows, glowing with warm light from inside. And then I saw Diane. She wasn't hidden in some corner. She was sitting right on the stone steps, pressed against the freezing wall, curled up like a child. She was wearing the thin, cream-colored cashmere sweater I gave her for her birthday. That sweater was made for a mild autumn evening, not a Colorado snowstorm. I could see her salt and pepper hair clumped together from the damp. Her lips were pale. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, hands gripping her elbows. I didn't shout. I didn't run. I just stood there and looked through the massive window. Inside, a crystal chandelier flooded the grand living room with light. A stone fireplace stretched nearly to the ceiling, flames roaring so strong I could feel the heat from where I stood. Mark, my son, was standing beside Chloe, my daughter-in-law. Chloe was laughing, a wide, radiant smile, as she reached out to take a glass of champagne from her father, Attorney Vance. They were celebrating, opening gifts. No one looked outside. No one noticed that the woman who gave birth to Mark, the woman who spent 30 years building this family, was being left outside in freezing air. The pain wasn't a sob. It was a stone lodged in my throat. My chest tightened, not from the cold, but from the absurdity, from the betrayal of what I was witnessing. I had traveled the world, built the Sterling Holdings empire, and trusted my son completely to handle everything here. This was what that trust had produced. I opened the car door. The slam shattered the silence. Diane looked up. There was no relief in her eyes, only fear. Was she afraid of me, or afraid of what would happen once I stepped in? I knelt beside her. The stone burned with cold. My hand touched her cheek. Her skin felt like ice. Diane, my voice was rough. What happened? She stammered, trying to defend them. Rob, I spilled some wine, a bottle of expensive wine, from the Vance family. She pointed to a small stain on the white carpet inside. Mark said, I needed to calm down. That cool air would help. I locked myself outside. The fear in her eyes was worse than the cold. She was protecting the people who punished her. I lifted her up. Her body was shockingly light. I pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped inside, carrying with me the cold and frozen rage. All laughter stopped. Mark walked toward me. There was no remorse on his face, only irritation. Dad, he said calmly, as if I were the problem. We have guests. Mom hasn't been well. We're following the doctor's advice, trying to manage her condition. Chloe stepped in, her voice sweet, but hard as steel. The doctor said Mom, Diane needs to avoid stress. She intentionally disrupted our celebration. We were just trying to manage the situation. Manage, I repeated it quietly, yet my voice echoed through the room. It was the voice I used to close multi-million-dollar deals. Cold, final. You call leaving your mother outside in the snow. Management. I looked straight into Mark's eyes. He didn't look away. That made it worse. He believed he was right. He believed this cruelty was necessary. I laid Diane down on the large leather sofa. She wouldn't stop shaking. Then I turned back to Mark, Chloe, and the satisfied face of Attorney Vance behind them. There is no explanation, I said, every word heavy that justifies throwing your mother into the snow. This ends now. I didn't need to raise my voice to break their arrogance. I glanced at my watch. 10:35 in the evening. Pack my wife's things, I ordered. Right now. We're leaving. In Mark and Chloe's stunned expressions, I saw the rage of people being stripped of control. They were used to running everything. But now, the man who built all of this, the man they mistook for weak and distracted, had finally awakened. Mark and Chloe didn't dare push back right away. Being exposed in a room full of guests, even through silence alone, stunned them. Besides, they still thought I was just an angry old man, a brief outburst that would end with a large check. But I wasn't angry. I was calculating. I sat beside Diane on the sofa, pulled a heavy wool blanket over her shoulders. The warmth slowly seeped in, but she was still trembling. I could feel her trying to speak. The words wouldn't come. Fear had locked her throat shut. "Bring Diane's bag out here, Mark," I said again. My voice low, meant only for Mark and Chloe. 10 minutes. If it's not here, I'll call security and report a robbery. That was a language Mark understood. Power. Threat. He frowned, glanced at Chloe, then reluctantly turned and climbed the wooden spiral staircase. Chloe stayed where she was, struggling to hold her composure. "Dad, Rob," she began, her voice soft but edged with menace. "You're endangering Diane's health. The doctor warned us about sudden environmental changes. If anything happens, we'll be forced to hold you responsible." I looked straight at her. Chloe's eyes were an icy blue, beautiful in an artificial way. "You're not a doctor, Chloe," I said calmly. "And if anything happens to my wife tonight, you and Mark will be held responsible. I'll make sure of that." She took a step back. The confidence in her face began to crack. Only then did her father step forward. Vance, the famous attorney. He said nothing. He just met my eyes. That silence was the most frightening part. I turned back to Diane. She had finally stopped shaking. She squeezed my hand, weakly. "Rob," she whispered. "Mark," he said. "He needed my signature for the—" She stopped, glanced around the room in fear. The trust. A sudden key word. Mark and Chloe had never mentioned any trust to me. I had delegated everything at home to Mark, while I focused on major deals overseas. I brushed Diane's hair gently. "It's okay, Diane. We'll talk about this later." Mark returned, dropping Diane's old leather bag onto the hardwood floor with a thud. "It's done," he said. "Are you satisfied now? You can take Mom and go. But you should know, everything related to finances, temporary control, and Mom's assets is under my authority. You gave that to me. You can't change it because of a moment of impulse." He emphasized the words, "you gave." He was reminding me of the greatest mistake of my life. I trusted my son. I was too busy building an empire to notice I had handed the keys to a traitor. I stood up. I didn't pick up the bag. I stared at Mark. "I'll be speaking with your attorney Vance very soon, Mark," I said evenly. "Don't forget, I built this empire from nothing, and I know how to destroy things far faster than I ever built them." I didn't wait for a reply. I carefully helped Diane to her feet and walked her out of the glowing mansion, leaving behind whispers and the restrained fury of people who believed they still controlled my life. The drive to Denver passed in strained silence. I had rented a secure penthouse, one I used for private meetings. Once we arrived, and I secured the place, I checked on Diane. Physically, she was stable. Mentally, she was not. "Where's your phone, Diane?" I asked. She shook her head weakly. "Mark has it," he said. I was being watched. By outsiders. That he needed to protect me. A blatant lie, meant to isolate her. Then she looked at the pillow and pointed. "This." She indicated an old iPad she hadn't used in a long time. "I use it to listen to music. Mark doesn't know the passcode." I turned it on. There were no social media apps, no email, but I saw a voice recording app, one I had installed years ago, for her to capture sudden interior design ideas. Inside the folder, there was a file labeled Living Room Rug Advice, saved 3 days earlier. I pressed play. The first sound was a bedroom door opening softly. Then Chloe's voice, sweet and merciless. "We need to speed this up. Mom is trying to contact old friends. Mark, did you change the dosage? Just 3 more days. and we'll have the final signature for the new trust agreement. She's too exhausted to resist. Then Mark's voice, cold and precise. Adjusting the dosage just makes her more confused, Emily. 3.5 million U.S. dollars has already been moved out as management fees. Once she signs the permanent trust, Sterling Holdings will be ours. Dad is too old to fight back. I gripped the iPad. 3.5 million. A small amount in a $5 billion empire, but proof of a systematic leak. I felt no anger anymore, only the cold clarity of resolve. I hadn't just been betrayed. I had been methodically targeted. I looked at Diane, already asleep from exhaustion. It was time to call Ethan Vance. Not Chloe's attorney Vance. Ethan. The only personal attorney I ever fully trusted. Long retired. "Hello, Ethan," I said, my voice low and steady. "My Christmas just ended. I need a military-grade IT specialist. Immediately. It looks like I'm about to clean up a $5 billion mess created by my own son." Ethan Vance didn't disappoint me. Even in retirement, he had kept his network intact. The next morning, after the snow finally stopped falling, a man named Marcus arrived. Marcus was an IT security specialist, former intelligence work, now a private cybersecurity consultant. We met in the Denver penthouse. The space felt cold, not from temperature, but from the absence of family warmth. Winter light poured through the windows, catching dust in the air, and settling on the old iPad resting heavily on the glass table. I handed the iPad to Marcus and gave him a brief summary of what I had heard. He didn't say much, just nodded, expression blank, completely focused. "They didn't use cheap tracking software," Rob Marcus said, after nearly 2 hours examining the device and network data. His voice was flat, like a technical report. "They installed a far more sophisticated spyware system. It's directly linked to the Wi-Fi network in the Aspen house. It's designed to listen, log network activity, and prioritize poorly secured devices, like this old iPad." But what truly chilled me wasn't the spyware. Marcus had found a vulnerability inside Mark's internal network. "Mark is confident," Marcus said, glancing at me. "He encrypted all the important data, but stored the core files in a hidden folder on an older internal server. A server he believed was disconnected. My guess? He kept it as a trophy." Marcus typed a few final commands. A file appeared on his screen. File name, the legacy blueprint. Phase 3. A sharp pain hit my temple. This was a plan, not impulsive greed. I reached for the laptop, but Marcus stopped me with a gentle shake of his head. "Let me summarize it for you," he said quietly. "It's clinical." Then he began to read. Every word, every sentence, landed like a bullet. The document wasn't written by Mark. It was created by Chloe's father, Attorney Vance. It outlined a 2-year strategy to transfer control of Sterling Holdings. It wasn't just about money. It was about psychological destruction, aimed at Diane, my wife. Phase 2, objective, Marcus read emotionless. Isolate the target. Eliminate external support systems. Friends, hobbies, and similar influences. Assessment achieved 85%. Phase 3, objective. Weaponize unstable health conditions for legal leverage. Adjust medication dosage to induce confusion and public incidents. Assessment, in progress. Risk level, low. I saw Diane's terrified face again. She hadn't just been isolated, she had been slowly poisoned. And then, the most horrifying detail, in the appendix, there was a list titled Disciplinary Actions Log. It documented every punishment Diane received for what they called inappropriate behavior. December 23rd. Target damaged valuable guest property. Wine. Action, forced exposure to extreme environment. Result, significant reduction in resistance. November 10th, target attempted to access bank accounts. Action, Wi-Fi access terminated and isolated in bedroom for 48 hours. Result, target accepted control. I covered my face. I couldn't believe my wife's life had been reduced to metrics, reports, and cruel success ratings. This wasn't explosive rage. It was a deep, aching realization of my own failure. I had trusted my judgment too much. I built an empire on trust, yet was blind to the cruelty happening under my own roof. I handed my wife's life to a monster. The worst part is, Marcus hesitated. For the first time, his voice carried emotion. They had everything prepared to place Diane in a specialized care facility. Attorney Vance already drafted documents declaring her mentally incompetent. If you hadn't taken her last night, they would have executed it this morning. I looked at Diane, sleeping peacefully on the bed. She hadn't just escaped the cold of Christmas night. She had escaped a permanent cage, legalized by my own daughter-in-law's father. "Marcus," I said. My voice was completely cold now. No warmth, no guilt. "We are not calling the police yet. We will use this information. I want Mark and Chloe to have no idea we have this file. Erase every trace of access. Then, we begin the counteroffensive." I looked again at the legacy blueprint. The name suggested a noble inheritance. To me, it was proof of betrayal. I needed to turn their plan of destruction into the destruction of them. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out over the quiet city of Denver. I spent 62 years building. Now, it was time to clean house, one step at a time, slowly, and in a way that would hurt the betrayers the most. After Marcus left with a copy of the legacy blueprint, I knew the negotiation phase was over. Now, it was time to act. I needed an immediate shock, something that would knock Mark and Chloe off balance. I couldn't wait. Every passing minute gave them more time to reinforce the legal defenses built by Chloe's father. A few hours later, I began. I didn't look for a defense attorney. I didn't call a criminal lawyer. I called an emergency meeting of the Sterling Holdings Board of Directors. Mark made a fatal mistake when he challenged my authority. The moment he temporarily froze several corporate accounts tied to me, he unknowingly reopened the door for my return. The setting was simple. The penthouse, a virtual boardroom. I asked Diane to sit beside me. Her presence mattered. She was far calmer now, no longer shrinking in fear. Knowing the truth had given her back part of her will. The meeting began at 10 in the morning. Denver time. Even on a holiday, no board member dared ignore a call from Robert Sterling. Mark appeared on screen, confident, tense, composed. He had no idea what I was holding. He believed this was his moment, his chance to prove he was the only one capable of running the company. He began his presentation, polished, professional, arrogance tucked neatly beneath the surface. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mark said, "Robert Sterling has shown clear signs of psychological instability following the Christmas incident. He committed what could be described as a medical kidnapping involving Mom Diane, and is now making reckless financial decisions. As the designated successor, I formally request the board vote to transfer emergency executive control to me." That's when he crossed the line. He used the words medical kidnapping. He said psychological instability. While Diane sat right beside me, calm, steady, and fully present, I muted Mark's microphone. The sudden silence unsettled the entire board. I looked directly into the camera. My voice didn't shake, but it carried the weight of deep disappointment. "Good morning," I said. "This is Robert Sterling. I apologize for interrupting your holiday, but I need to make an important announcement. This has nothing to do with my health. It has everything to do with transparency and the future of our company." I paused, long enough for everyone to notice Diane holding my hand. First I said my wife Diane is medically stable. She has been systematically manipulated, both psychologically and pharmacologically. And the individuals responsible are my son Mark, with assistance from his father-in-law. Shock rippled through the meeting. On a secondary screen, Mark was screaming. Still, muted. "I'm not speaking emotionally," I continued. "I'm speaking with evidence." Marcus had prepared everything. I shared my screen. The Legacy Blueprint Phase 3. No dramatic video, just cold text. Detailed objectives. Calculated manipulation. I pointed to one line: weaponize unstable health conditions for legal leverage. Then I played the audio recording from Diane's iPad. Mark and Chloe's voices, discussing medication changes, waiting for the final signature, planning the takeover. 3 minutes. That's all it took. Mark's career collapsed in 3 minutes. Years of image building. Gone. I looked at him on the screen. His face was pale now. The arrogance was gone. Only panic remained. I am in possession of evidence, I said, showing that Mark Sterling used corporate funds to pay for legal and consulting services related to manipulation and potential elder abuse. This is a severe breach of fiduciary duty and business ethics. I turned back to the board. I've worked with you for decades. I know what you value. I could handle this quietly, behind closed doors. But I won't. This betrayal must be exposed. Mark didn't just betray me. He betrayed the legacy we built together. Mark finally unmuted himself. His voice broke as he shouted, "You can't do this. You can't destroy me. This is everything I have." I looked at him without mercy. I was no longer a loving father. I was a chief executive making a final decision. "Board members," I said, "I am not only terminating Mark Sterling from all positions within Sterling Holdings, I am making a larger decision." I looked at Diane. She smiled softly, in agreement. "Sterling Holdings is valued at over $5 billion US dollars," I said. "I built it on trust. That trust has been broken. To protect the company from any future takeover attempts or legal disputes by any member of the Sterling or Vance families, I hereby declare the following Sterling Holdings will be dissolved. All assets will be transferred into a private charitable trust, the Sterling Compassion Foundation." The silence was absolute, an empire erased in a single moment. "The mission of this foundation," I concluded, "will be overseen by Diane Sterling, under strict supervision by selected board members. Everything Mark and Chloe tried to steal will now serve to protect the vulnerable. Please prepare the paperwork." I ended the call, leaving Mark shouting into a dead screen. I turned to Diane. She gripped my hand tightly. "We did it, Rob." I nodded. "I lost my son, but I saved my wife and my own soul." After the board meeting ended, the penthouse fell silent again. Mark's shouting was gone. Cut off. We had just completed a ruthless but necessary business decision. An empire, dismantled in minutes. And somehow, it felt like release. Diane stood up, walked to the window, and looked out over Denver. The sun was up now, but the air still carried a chill. "You did the right thing, Rob," she said. Her voice was clear, strong. "Mark only cared about the chair and the numbers. He never deserved what you built." I let out a long breath, heavy with a father's guilt. "I didn't just lose my son, Diane," I said quietly. "I lost the meaning behind everything I did. I built all of this to protect our family, and I was blind enough to let it become the weapon that destroyed it. This guilt wasn't about money. It was about time. The years I was away, the moments I believed Mark when he said, 'Everything's fine.' My blind trust was the soil where their betrayal grew. We didn't stay in that penthouse long. It was secure, but it still smelled like work, strategy, control. We needed a clean break, a complete separation from the past." 2 weeks later, after completing the first legal steps to convert Sterling Holdings into a charitable foundation, we sold most of what we owned: the Aspen Mansion, the Florida estate, the yacht. All of it liquidated quickly, turned into cash for the foundation. Mark and Chloe tried to sue. Attorney Vance attempted to block the dissolution, claiming I was mentally unfit. But the legacy blueprint and the recordings were undeniable. Mark became the subject of investigations for financial abuse of an elderly person and medical manipulation. He and Chloe faced total social and legal collapse. No more protection from the Vance family. We bought a much smaller home, a quiet log house in another Colorado town. Its value was around $800,000 US, a fraction of what we once owned. No complex security system, no towering stone fireplace, just pine wood, simple slate, and a small porch facing the mountains. This is where I began to find peace again. The greatest change was Diane. She fully recovered. No more anxiety, no more shrinking fear. Being freed from Mark and Chloe's control, and knowing she helped expose them, gave her strength. One afternoon, I sat by the window, watching the news about Mark. Socially isolated, unemployed, facing multiple lawsuits. I felt a cold satisfaction, but no joy. Diane walked in, not as a fragile wife, but as a woman with purpose. "You know, Rob," she said, holding a design sketch, "the Sterling Compassion Foundation needs a new center. I designed it. Large windows, natural light, and no exterior locks anywhere. She chose to use her interior design talent for the foundation. She focused on creating warm, safe spaces for elder care centers, helping victims of abuse, people like her. I no longer ran a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I became an advisor to the foundation. My work was no longer stock deals, but making sure the charity functioned with integrity and truly protected the vulnerable. The following Christmas Eve, everything was different. We sat inside our small log home. No guests, no fake laughter, no luxury. Just the two of us. And a small warm fire. I made our family's traditional hot chocolate. Snow fell softly outside, covering the pine trees in white. I looked at Diane. She was reading, peaceful, content. I took her hand. Her skin was warm, healthy. This Christmas, "You're not cold anymore, Diane," I said, my voice catching slightly. She looked at me, with love and understanding. "You saved me, Rob," she whispered. "You saved me from that cold house. But more than that, you saved me from the isolation inside my own soul. We lost a son, but we found the meaning of our lives again." I looked out the window, watching the snow fall. I lost the fortune I spent a lifetime building, but I regained what mattered most: my wife, and the truth about myself. I found prosperity not in account balances, but in connection and compassion. That was the final reckoning, and the only real ending to this story. Thank you for listening to my story. Sometimes, the truth about family hurts more than any business deal ever could. If Robert and Diane Sterling's story touched your heart, or if you've ever faced betrayal from the people closest to you, tell me your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video. Share it with anyone who needs the courage to keep going. And subscribe to the channel so I can continue sharing stories of conflict, truth, and redemption. Until next time.